You, Acting President, I'm very pleased to rise and speak on the Service Victoria Amendment Bill 2024 to not allow errant S's to creep into the title of the bill, nor the agency to which it refers. Service Victoria is obviously an incredibly important part of the government's approach to making the practice of dealing with government simpler for citizens. It is an agency established to transform the way that services that government delivers to its citizens are handled and to provide to the citizens a much more seamless experience, a much more technology-focused, a much more citizen-centric, technology-led approach to dealing with government. Because making the way that members of our community engage with the various arms of government, the various departments and agencies of government, improving that practice, we know, will increase the level of trust and confidence that members of the community have in the services they receive. When they see us doing things well, when they see us engaging with them in the modes and channels that they use, that they want to be able to use, they are more likely to believe that the services that we provide are relevant and of value to them. And ensuring that we have high quality, relevant services that people need delivered in the way that they've come to expect is really important, is fundamentally important to the Allan Labor government, because we are in the business of delivering good government services. And we want people to understand that the services that we provide are not only high quality and relevant to their needs, but also easy to use. And that's the foundational question when it comes to considering things like Service Victoria. Because as governments and as government agencies, we've got to think about how citizens see government, not how government sees citizens as its first call. I would take a punt, although I haven't done any research of my own on this, that most people have no real understanding of the various acronyms of government departments and agencies, nor what they do and how they operate. And so we as government shouldn't expect that their view into us, the first call of their view into us, is to try and navigate such a maze of often changing letters, which is what Service Victoria was designed to deal with. One of the things that Service Victoria was designed to deal with when it was set up and established by this government. It was designed to provide both a consumer-facing, a citizen-facing way in to a range of government services, but the second task was to actually try and ensure that those transactions were transformed to make them more citizen-centric, simpler and easier, and to strip out the unnecessary complexity that often bedevils the way that customer-facing transactions occur within large organisations, whether they be government or private sector. Large organisations that deal with individuals but do it at scale and in bulk, often don't think too much, or at least the bad ones often don't think too much about how these services are experienced by individuals who need to use them. And it is incumbent upon all good thinking large organisations, whether they be government agencies or private sector organisations, to be continually trying to figure out how to make those systems work better, to improve the customer experience, because as I said earlier, improving the customer experience, improving citizens' experience of dealing with government is a key part of our task in increasing their faith in our ability to deliver services to them. Obviously, Service Victoria has been up and running for several years now. This legislation before us today seeks to make some necessary amendments to the framework, the legislative framework that underpins its operations. I think obviously there has been a real drive across government to improve improve service delivery to consumers, to citizens. I think sometimes events require us to accelerate that process, and certainly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we very rapidly saw both why it's important to have these sorts of platforms, because during the pandemic, the Service Victoria platform played an enormously important role in providing the kinds of, at the time, what was required in terms of check-in services, the ability to fast deploy that to millions of Victorians. At its peak, the Service Victoria platform was downloaded onto 7 million devices across Victoria. But that experience of those years also demonstrates why it's important to have the capability within government to be able to deliver on that in such a rapid way, so that when those challenges do emerge, sometimes unexpected, we can respond in the way that consumers want. The bill, and since the pandemic, obviously Service Victoria has continued to grow its digital service offering and now provides around 100 different government services from a range of areas. I know many will out in the community who, for example, have a working with Children Check. Hopefully people will have taken advantage of the new capability within the Service Victoria app to have a electronic version of their Working with Children Check on their Service Victoria app on their phone. I was at a preschool in Cheltenham last week where that came in very handy for both me and my staff member, very easily able to pull out our phones and show that we had a valid Working with Children check. I know that's something that millions of Victorians could find beneficial in their day-to-day lives, and that's what Service Victoria is all about. We need, during the last full year that we have records for, so 2022, 2023, Service Victoria has been active in collecting consumer feedback, so nearly 200,000 pieces of customer feedback were given to Service Victoria during that time, and the satisfaction score that people have, so the way that we are measuring people's satisfaction with the service that Service Victoria is providing, overall satisfaction score of 96.7%, which exceeds their BP3 target of 95%. And what I think is really important and really gratifying for us when we're looking at whether this is working or not only is the volume of people using it, not only is their satisfaction, but the most common word used by customers in their feedback on their interactions with the Service Victoria app was easy. It was easy to use. And for those involved in customer-facing transactions, that should be one of the things we absolutely strive for. Not only scoring well on their ratings, but getting people to think that the way that they are engaging with this particular government service was easy. And I think that's a credit to all the work that's gone into it. As Mr Davis said in his contribution, this bill follows an independent review into the Service Victoria app, which was tabled in the Parliament in 2022. Obviously, the principal legislation, which was introduced in 2018, included a provision for the Act to be independently reviewed after its commencement, and this review was conducted by Dr Claire Noon. And the bill implements in its recommendation for Service Victoria to continue to deliver on the government's commitment to digital transformation. Makes a few key amendments, broadens some of the definitions in the Act to allow for end-to-end customer transactions, so that unlike the original framework under which Service Victoria was established in its legislation, through the amendments that are proposed in this piece of legislation, the end-to-end transaction will be able to be done by Service Victoria itself, including things like the issuance of documents and provision of certificates, approvals and grants for customers. It amends the list of Service Victoria, the legislation also amends the list of Service Victoria functions to be more principles-based, so that the platform can be more innovative and deliver more sort of bundled type service offerings. For example, would allow the bundling of a range of outdoor recreation permits, like a fishing licence and a boat and trailer registration and a marine licence renewal. And if we do that in one single transaction, which will be allowed for by this Act, those people who need licences or permits from a range of different agencies to do the same type of thing, their life will be made a lot simpler. And I know, Acting President, you are absolutely concerned to make sure that people who enjoy the outdoors have an easier time of it from the government, and it is great to see the government delivering on that for people right across our community. The legislation will also reduce back office administration currently in the Act, reducing the need to make regulations to deliver new services, so that Service Victoria can respond more quickly to government priorities. I suppose this is a reflection on the rubber hitting the road between legislators and technologists, some of whom are very fond of extensive mechanisms for regulatory functions to be specified in pieces of delegated legislation. Sometimes it is more efficient and more effective to allow that to occur by other means, so that the range of things which are required to be placed into legislation or subordinate legislation can be reduced to matters of important principle rather than unnecessary technical detail. And those sorts of changes will definitely speed up the ability of Service Victoria and government more broadly to deliver on the kind of digital services that people want. It will enable more flexible options for identity verification and allow Victoria to align with the Commonwealth Trusted Digital Identity Framework. Currently, there's very complex provisions about applications processing and review, and the bill will support a more flexible and responsive approach. Obviously, things like, as we move forward into an increasingly digital age, things like identity frameworks and trusted identity sources will become even more important for consumers, and it's important that as government, as the provider of identity verification, it's important that our practices are both robust, modern and efficient. The last couple of minutes I'll just spend just talking a bit more broadly about a few things raised in debate. I mean, I think Mr Davis did raise an important issue more broadly about cybersecurity. Information security is an incredibly important part of the way that all agencies need to do business these days. I think it is demonstrable that it's now been, about how seriously this government takes those issues, that it's now been about a little more than 5 years, 5 or 6 years since Victoria appointed its first Chief Information Security Officer in 2017. This Labor government, our first cybersecurity strategy was released those years ago. It's always been an important part of the vigilance that this government's showing towards the information that it holds. I do agree that the range of services that government offers can't only be the domain of those who may be digital natives. There are many in our community who do prefer other contact mechanisms. I don't necessarily think that all members, as Mr Davis would suggest, all members of multicultural communities are unable to use digital services, but certainly there are some who need those services to be provided in language, for example, but also, and I think this is an important point, some aren't digital natives, some aren't comfortable with digital channels. Moving those of us who are into those channels frees up resources and capacity for those who aren't to be able to use more traditional means of customer contact. And being efficient in the allocation of government resources should be always something that we have an eye to. This is important legislation to update the Service Victoria provisions to keep Victoria moving on the journey that we need to be on in terms of transforming digitally the interactions that our citizens have with government. It'll make important improvements to the way Service Victoria operates. I'm glad to see that, and I'm pleased to support the bill on the floor today.